also be brief. It's not going to be like a Human Rights Council meeting. I would like to congratulate you all for this exercise at the university as well as the professors. I think it was wonderful. I enjoyed it very thoroughly. I wish the meetings of the Human Rights Council were as polite and as serious as they were here at the university. Let me tell you two words very briefly. I am, besides being a lawyer, a human rights lawyer, I'm also a journalist. And I was very excited when I took this mandate because I also work in communication with young people, in training young people on human rights, on freedom of expression, but also on methods of expression. We, in rural areas in my own country, Guatemala, we do trainings on theater as an instrument of communication and education. We do community radio, local television, and electronic journalism. And we prepare everyone, women and men, on internet. We have a very serious gap, a gender gap. All men know a little bit about internet, most women do not. So for us, that was also the idea of internet is also a gender equalizer, the idea of having equal opportunities for all. And I thought it was going to be easy to do freedom of expression. I thought it was going to be a consensus in the world. And it's becoming much more complicated. As a matter of fact, my report this year has a whole chapter on limitations, because in a way I was forced by the debate on dealing with Article 19.3 and 20, on specifically determining what are the exceptional and very small limitations. And the reason is because many states are trying to build limitations around issues of religion, the concept of defamation of religion, which for me does not exist, or as an issue of combating terrorism, or as an issue of combating organized crime, like in other parts of the world. But nevertheless, the idea is that limitations is again being debated. And in order to stop that debate, I made this theme, the very few pages you're allowed because of the translation to the languages, I made it on minorities, indigenous peoples, and people in vulnerable sectors of society, like women, children, and population in extreme poverty, and freedom of expression. With the idea that freedom of expression is something that has to be enjoyed by all, with no limitations, men and women, children and elderly, people of all races, all religions, and all parts of the world. But very specifically by minorities. Even those countries that are raising the issue of religion are talking about it because they represent the majority religion of their state. But they forget about the minorities. And oftentimes the minorities are those that are getting their rights violated. From the fact that they don't have community radios to the fact that they're not free to speak out and to raise their voice. This is crucial in the world. I also include the Convention on Cultural Diversity of UNESCO. I was very pleased to be here. I'm a personal friend of one of the past directors of UNESCO, of Federico Mayor, who actually began the whole concept of building the culture of peace as an element, a cultural element. But I believe that UNESCO has made the contribution of culture of peace, but also the contribution of cultural diversity. I always say that freedom of expression now has moved from being an individual right to being also a collective right, because it's the right of associations, of groups, to express themselves, but it's the right of the population of a nation to be informed in diversity, with diverse pluralism. But I added the element that it's also the right of people. It's the right of peoples of a nation to reproduce their culture, their language, their tradition, and their values. And it should be seen as a people's rights as well. The same way with internet that you were looking at today introduces a new element. Freedom of expression is in the ICCPR, yes, it's part of civil and political rights. But today, electronic communication becomes a fundamental element for economic and social development. So today, also communication is an economic right, because without access to internet, there is no development. The poorest, most remote rural community has to be guaranteed that they will equally have access to the electronic communication, to the technology, and to the equipment necessary, which is why I'm proposing within the Millennium Development Goals, this exchange, which is already there in goal number 8, the exchange of technology from developed countries to developing countries. but also in every nation of the world and every state of the world to establish a fund to subsidize access to the poorer sectors of the population. So no one will be excluded from this new industrial revolution that we're having with the technology of communication. I understand that Korea has the highest interconnectivity in East Asia, 80%, more than any other country, I understand. But I always say that having that interconnectivity is a tremendous leap and a tremendous development. But it goes hand in hand, technological development has to go hand in hand with the development of democracy. A truly democratic model that guarantees that that technology is accessible to all, but also that that technology will serve the purpose of free speech, freedom of expression by all, with no censorship. And finally, in the term of limitations, which I put there, I basically make the same arguments we have always had, that limitations have to be the exception, have to be small, have to be clear, have to be necessary, and have to be proportional to the good that we're defending, to the other rights we're defending. And I list a series of principles. But more importantly, what I wanted to do by listing a series of principles on limitations is establishing that no one can argue theoretical matters as limitations. You cannot limit freedom of expression on the basis of philosophy, political schools, ideologies, religion, or spiritual perceptions. All those are open to dialogue and to debate, with respect in the wisdom of the culture of peace that UNESCO has animated us to build, but it's still open to debate. Here there is even a question of whether in journalism it's valid to use sarcasm or irony or cartoons that make fun of issues, which is perfectly acceptable in all forms of communication. The broader the opening of communication, the more important it is. And finally, and with this I finish, and this is probably the most difficult one, this openness and the idea of enhancing freedom of expression as a form to combat racism, discrimination, and all forms of discrimination is, I thought, accepted but relatively new in some quarters of the world. But more difficult yet is the principle I'm also enhancing for public service. Defamation is being decriminalized in the world because using criminal law, using penal law, creates a fear and a sanction that actually intimidates in the use of free speech or freedom of expression. And I believe that it's important to decriminalize it, to make it a civil action for the protection of the reputation of individuals, but an action that can find non-criminal, non-penal ways, like the correction or like economic sanctions. But more importantly, and this is the one that most politicians don't like, is defamation should never exist for public officials. I say that democracy marks a new type of public officials. Before, a public official was the authority that represented the king or the queen or the royalty. Today, in a true democracy, a public official is a public servant. That is to guarantee the exercise of the rights of the people in that territory. And it's a rights-oriented policy. And as a public servant, it's open to scrutiny. I always say public office comes with public scrutiny, which is what we call today transparency. And that public scrutiny goes hand in hand with public criticism. This is the part no politicians like, nor in East Asia, nor in Latin America, nor in Africa, nor in Europe. Politicians are not used to being challenged or criticized. And I think that is the essence of the checks and balances that a democracy must have. Not all criticism will be valid. They don't have to agree with it, but they do have to believe that creating the free space, the open space for that criticism, that debate of ideas is crucial. And this, I think, will be the big challenge for us in the future, to make freedom of expression, the use of internet, the use of alternative media, the use of new technologies, valid for all peoples in all sectors of the world. I congratulate you and I thank you for this exercise and this invitation tonight.
All right, I think the judge has his own verdict right now, so.